And now, here's professional comics writer Marv Wolfman introducing the publisher of Marvel Comics, Mr. Stan Lee.
I'm supposed to introduce Stan, and there's quite a bit I could say about him. However, he is my boss, and he has the power of hiring and firing. So I'm just going to say, here's Stan Lee.
He's fired. Come back here. I may have to answer a question, and this is a veritable fount of information. Thank you, culture lovers. I am with an outfit called Marvel Comics. And if you hadn't done that, you'd have seen a grown man standing up here weeping. You're liable to see it anyway, because as I look at this sea of hostile faces, I'm saying to myself, what on earth am I going to talk about for the 3/4 of an hour that we've all been sentenced to? So why don't I ask you, because I'm equally inept at any kind of speaking. It doesn't matter what I talk about, I do it badly, so I might as well talk about what you'd like to hear. Does anybody just want to shout out something that they'd like to hear about, so at least I'll know I'm saying something that at least somebody wants to hear? All right, I heard the Silver Surfer. I heard How'd You Get, but I didn't hear the rest. How did I get started? All right, let's do it that way. Thanks a lot. You guys may keep me alive up here. How did I get started? And then we segue into the Silver Surfer. Well, when I was a kid many decades ago, just to show you how things never work out, I wanted to be an actor. And they had something called the WPA Federal Theater. It was part of Franklin Roosevelt's NRA New Deal. And it was to keep guys off the streets and from stealing hubcaps and so forth. And they set up little theatrical groups, and I joined one. Orson Welles was also a part of this thing, and many other big names. The only thing is the other guys stayed with it, but I had to make a living, and it didn't pay too well. So I got a lot of very exotic jobs in writing, because I always was fairly facile at it. I got one job writing obituaries for a news service, obituaries of famous people who are still alive. You know, when a celebrity dies, an hour later there's a special issue of a paper, and his whole life story is in the paper, and you probably wondered, how did they ever write this so fast? Well, that thing's been on file for years. So then I heard there was a job open at Marvel Comics, which was then called Timely Comics for a reason that nobody ever figured out. And Jack Kirby and Joe Simon were practically the whole staff, and they needed I better watch what I say, because I never know, Jack may be here. Anyway, he and Joe were virtually the whole staff. Jack sat at a table behind a big cigar, and he was drawing. Joe stood up behind another big cigar, and he would ask Jack, you comfortable? Do you want some more ink? Is your brush okay? Is the pencil all right? And then Joe would go out and yell at me for a while. And that was the way we spent our days. I was a gopher. I'd go for the coffee, for the broom, for Jack's cigars. And they also let me write some copy. And little by little, when they found out that I could spell and I knew which end of a sentence to put a period at, they started exploiting me, just the way I've done with Marv Wolfman and everybody else over the years. And I'd start writing stories. Now, in those days, the whole world is totally illogical, and as you probably know, because many of you even live in the same world, nothing makes sense. Now, in those days, the post office had a rule. The rule was a magazine couldn't be called a magazine unless it had 2 pages of text. Now, that means a comic book, which is mostly drawings, had to have 2 pages of just type so that it could be called a magazine. Now, you may be wondering, in your innocence, why do they care if it's called a magazine or not? Well, the reason is if your magazine is called a magazine by the post office, it can be mailed to people at a cheaper rate. So we wanted it called a magazine. I didn't really care because I was still a gopher, but somebody way up there wanted it called a magazine. So I was writing these 2-page text features in order to convince the government that Timely Comics was publishing magazines. So there I was, making $11 a week, and this whole company rested on these 2 little page features that I wrote every month, and it gave me a great feeling of grandeur and importance. All right, after a while, Joe and Jack, for reasons that history will one day record, left Timely Comics, and the publisher, a stalwart named Martin Goodman, who owned the company, and all that his eye beheld, namely me at the moment, looked around at his vast empire, and he saw this one skinny kid with the broom in one hand and a typewriter in the other, and he said, "Hey, where's the rest of my staff?" And I said, "I'm it." And at that time, I was about 16 and a half, and he said, "Well, somebody's got to edit these books." He said, "Stan, can you kind of hold down the job till I get somebody else?" And I said, "Well, what'll it pay?" And I think I was offered a half $1 a page more, a week more or something, and to me that was like gold. It still is. And I said, "Okay, I'll take it." So he went off into the outside world to seek another editor, and I was now Stan Lee, boy editor pro tem. See, I have a terrible problem. I don't know what I am. Sometimes when people say to me, strangers, they'd have to be strangers, obviously, because a guy who isn't a stranger knows what I am. But a stranger might say, "Hey, what do you do?" My first impulse is to say, as I've said all my life, I'm a writer, or sometimes I'd say I'm an editor. And now I got to say I'm a publisher, but I'm not really anything, because publishers are guys who just handle the business end of a business. And I don't really just handle the business end. The company that owns us has 50 million businessmen who check numbers and charts and graphs, and they do all of that. I'm not an editor anymore because I'm lucky enough to have Marv and Archie Goodwin doing the black and whites and so forth. So I'm not the editor. I don't do any more comic book writing. And I'm not really sure what it is I do. I know I go to the office every day and I'm busy as hell, but I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't have time to write a Spider-Man movie. Now, I'm supposed to be writing another movie with this friend of mine, Alain Resnais, that we've been talking about for 3 years, and I keep putting him off, and he keeps running around to Europe and doing other films, and when he finishes each one, he says, "Stan, can we do it now?" And, do one more film, Alan. I'm sure by the time that's finished, we'll get together. He just finished Stavisky, which some of you might have seen, and he's doing a new one now that'll be filmed in New England. "Oh, I got a scoop for you." He says he has a role in it for me. I'm afraid to ask what kind, but you'll be seeing me on the silver screen from coast to coast very shortly. And I hope I'll be a hero. At any rate, when the Spider-Man film was discussed, it was discussed, perhaps I would write it, and I don't have the time. And then the fellow who's producing it, Steve Krantz, he knows Brian Clemens, who has done The Avengers, and is a pretty good writer, and Brian was interested, and he said if I work with Brian, he would have Brian do it, and I said, fine. But I have another scoop for you. This is a day for scoops for us, but you got to promise it must go no further than this room. So you're all under oath. I'm not sure now that Brian is going to write it because we've changed the entire concept of the Spider-Man movie. And it's not going to merely be a story of Spider-Man the way it was planned to be, but it's going to be something more, not quite, but more in the direction of a rock opera film than a regular story, you see. And we're discussing it now, and there's tremendous interest in Hollywood among some very big people. And in fact, I was just on the phone to Krantz last night, and we're trying to work out the details. You'll read all about it in the bullpen, or if you want to hear about it sooner, it's very easy. Get together, pool your money, have another convention here in about a month, invite me, and I'll tell you all about it. But otherwise, you'll read about it in the bullpen. But anyway, that's the story about why, at the moment, I'm not writing the Spider-Man movie. I don't know where we'll be in a year or two, but I would think that wherever we are, it's going to be at a most exciting plateau, and I hope that you're all going to be there with us. Now, let me close by saying that if you enjoyed this half as much as I do, and did, you had a really good time. So I want to compliment you on your choice of speakers. And with one final Excelsior, thank you all very much.